Hi, everyone, and welcome to SBAM's Small Business Briefing. I'm Sarah Miller, Vice President of Operations, and I am joined once again by my frequent co-host, Kelli Saunders. Kelli, welcome back to the show.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Kelli Saunders, Vice President of Policy and Engagement here at SBAM. And yes, 2 weeks in a row. So this is a special time. Brian is off and away today. And so, Sarah, I'm going to kick it back to you to recognize a new member. So tell us who's joined our ranks.
Yes, we've actually had quite a few new members join recently, but today we're welcoming Summit Cleaning Services, one of our new premium members. And if you're watching this and you haven't joined yet, please join. The work we do is because of members that take a chance on us and use our services. So sbam.org/join. All right, we have kind of an in-depth story to kick off today's show. And that is relative to a meeting on Friday with the State Board of Canvassers. And we have some news to share about that meeting. But Kelli, can we start with an explanation of what the Board of Canvassers does so our audience understands kind of the full impact of what we're going to be talking about today?
Absolutely. And just say bear with us here for this first part of the small business briefing because it is an elongated overview of what happened on Friday. And we really feel like it's important for all of you to know what occurred and why it impacts you. So, the State Board of Canvassers met on Friday and they met in Lansing. They had a rather robust agenda, and it did last from 9 until 5 p.m. And so, Jacob and myself were watching it online the entire time. And the reason is because they took up three different proposals too that really mean something to us. But again, to your point, Sarah, let's talk about what the State Board of Canvassers does. So some of you might know and some of you might not, but the Board of Canvassers is a four-member body and they are appointed by the governor and they are also subject to consent of the Senate. And the board members are selected from each of the two political parties receiving the greatest number of votes in the last election for the Secretary of State. So board members serve 4-year terms, and the terms are staggered so that the term of the Republican seat and the Democrat seat expire in February of odd numbered years. I almost said even, so good thing I checked my notes. But the duties of the State Board of Canvassers is pretty powerful and important, which is why it's balanced out by the parties and then supported by the Secretary of State staff. And this is why. So their main duties are to canvass and certify statewide elections, elections for legislative districts and cross county lines, all judicial offices except for the judge of the probate court. So think about every year when we have big elections or small or smaller elections. Every election goes to this board to be certified that yes, all the procedures were followed, all the books were reconciled, and the Secretary of State can close this election and these results are certified. So this board specifically every big, small election, make sure that these elections are certified. They conduct recounts for state level offices, so we've seen those in the past. They canvass nominating petitions filed with the Secretary of State, which is kind of what we're going to get, not these, but other petitions that we're going to get into today. They canvass state level ballot proposals, which we are going to go over today, and petitions. And they assign ballot designations and adopting ballot language for statewide ballot proposals, which is really what we're going to get in today. And they do approve the electronic voting systems for the state itself as well. So that is the main job of the State Board of Canvassers. Again, a very, very important function of our state government in this space. So, Sarah, I'll kick it back to you to go over this long agenda.
Yes, exactly. So that was helpful. That was a really good level set about the Board of Canvassers. But you referenced the marathon session and that they met 9 to 5 on Friday. So there's two proposals we're tracking, and that's why we were, specifically involved and wanted to represent at the meeting. But let's start with the first of two, which is relative to minimum wage. And can you talk about that referendum?
Very sorry, friends. It's not Groundhog's Day, but here we are talking about minimum wage and the tip credit again. So, obviously, last year the Supreme Court handed down a decision that the adopt and amend case had been overturned, and the legislature then had a really hard time coming to consensus at the end of last year on essentially saving the tip credit, the minimum wage schedule, and then, of course, the Earned Sick Time Act. We know at the beginning of this year, we obviously came to consensus, the legislature did alongside the governor, to set the minimum wage scale to save the tip credit. And also the Earned Sick Time Act, some of the grievances we had were rectified. The One Fair Wage group has come back to the table for a referendum on the minimum wage piece and the tip credit piece that was agreed upon earlier this year. So essentially, what happened was they put language in front of the State Board of Canvassers that was a repeal of that law altogether and went back to the Supreme Court schedule. Now we know from all the negotiations we had with the legislature this year that it was the minimum wage was actually accelerated. And so what was put into place by the Supreme Court was actually lower than what was decided on earlier in the year. Other than the tip credit was obviously preserved percentage wise. What this group specifically is upset about is the tip credit altogether. So this specific ballot language would repeal it altogether and put it back to the Supreme Court decision, like I said. Now, at the Board of Canvassers meeting, what they do is they decide what language is going to go in the summary for these petitions that are to be circulated. And so there is back and forth of proponents and opponents in front of the Board of Canvassers to decide what that summary is. And it's very important. So this ballot language actually came out really good. And what they were able to do was get the verbiage into the description that says it decreases the minimum wage because it does. And so the State Board of Canvassers saw that, compared the schedules, numbers are numbers, and said it is a decrease in the minimum wage. And so the verbiage on it, and we can obviously, I think, Sarah, we're going to include a link that Brian actually penned today for our website that you can see all the different ballot language, as well as his synopsis on it. And so we really feel as voters, when they look at this specific ballot language, they're going to reject this because nobody wants to see the minimum wage decrease. We know that the tip credit is wildly popular. And so to know, I also want to say that we go where we are needed, our members need us. And so we had our own lawyer there to argue, obviously, against the ballot language and get this to a place where it did tell the truth that this was a decrease to minimum wage. And so we use our vehicle called Small Business for a Better Michigan to make that case. And we couldn't be more pleased with how this turned out if it's going to go to the ballot, that it is honest with voters. Now, this referendum has to get the required amount of signatures, which is over 400,000. So the summary language was accepted and then the form was approved. And so they can start circulating petitions. Now, will they have a concerted effort? Is it grassroots or will it be paid for? Hard to know at this point, but it does seem like it's more of a grassroots effort. So they were disappointed. The group that is behind this is called Voters to Stop Pay Cuts, which is not truthful. And so we will see in the coming weeks and months if they are able to collect enough signatures, but we do count the wording in this as a victory. And are grateful that our lawyer was able to reason with the State Board of Canvassers to get that language into a place where we really feel like voters will reject it.
All right, there's a second proposal, and they like catchy names. This one's called Invest in My Kids, MI Kids. Tell us more about this.
This one is more disappointing. And if you recall, Jacob and I went over this one probably over a month or two ago now. And I know Brian's touched base on it, but it's a graduated income tax proposal. And obviously, a graduated income tax, really could be harmful to thousands of our small business owners because we know the way that this is worded that many of the the proposal is not honest in what it is, which is a graduated income tax, because they're calling it a surcharge. So our our lawyer that was there to argue for getting the correct language in place basically called this group on it that this is really a graduated income tax on some of our smallest earners. It's $500,000 as a single filer, $1 million as joint filers. So our income tax right now is 4.25%, which if you recall, we had a battle about that over a year ago too, because it was raised. And now they're saying if you make $500,000 as a single filer, a million as joint filers, you will have a 5% tax increase put on you to get to 9.25% in order to fund our schools. Now, there's a whole bunch of problems with that in this proposal. It does reference certain things it can be used for, like career and technical education, but it does not mandate it. And so, therefore, if you recall, the lottery was started years ago in order to help fill gaps within the school aid fund. This is very much similar, this proposal, to that proposal that was made years ago. And to this day, people are saying, why are schools underfunded when the lottery money was supposed to go to it? So we're skeptical that this proposal would truly help invest in my kids, if you will, with the way that it's written. We find it to be quite dishonest and then punishing some of our earners. We know that our small business owners are often pass-throughs. They use this as a cash flow option. And so there'll be many people within our universe that are hurt if this were to go through. Unfortunately, the verbiage that was passed by the State Board of Canvassers, which came with a lot of controversy because it was pushed way to the end and kind of rushed through, it does not specifically state that this is a graduated income tax. The verbiage that they use is a 5% increase on income taxes. Well, we know people understand a graduated income tax. It's been said for years. It's against the law in the Constitution. It says we can't have a graduated income tax. This would essentially repeal it and open it up to be so, and then it could obviously increase over time. We also look at the way that wages are drastically increasing every year, and we know more people will fall into this in an exacerbated rate over the years because we know wages are increasing to climb at a very, very strong rate. And so you're creating a really tough environment for people, specifically small business owners that may eventually fall into this bracket, to thrive and grow and to grow their business. And so, unfortunately, this language did not turn out the way that we exactly wanted it. It's Sarah, if you might be okay with that. I'm actually going to read this one because it is very confusing the way that it's written and the way that it's not transparent. So it says the constitutional amendment to add beginning in 2027 an additional 5% tax on annual taxable income over 1 million for joint filers and over 500,000 for single filers. This tax is in addition to existing state income taxes and is to be deposited into the school aid fund and required to be used exclusively on local school district classrooms, career and technical education, reducing class sizes, and recruiting and retaining teachers, and subject funds to annual audit. So, the good news is we got surcharge taken out and said it's very clearly a tax. That's good. But it's not totally transparent in what it is, which is a graduated income tax. So you can count on us to be doing a lot of messaging around this in the coming months. The one key part to this piece was the form I talked about, which is like a second procedural measure with the Board of Canvassers. The form was not approved on Friday because they rushed at the end. So they will be coming back July 10th to approve the form. What that means is they cannot circulate petitions at this time because that form was not approved. Now, it could be possible that that form will become under a lot of scrutiny. That means like period's not in the right place, something's, misspelled, could be any of those things. We'll see what happens. But that will happen July 10th. And then petitions would be able to be circulated if the form is accepted by the Board of Canvassers. So please stay tuned to this. This is really important as we proceed in the coming months, because we know steps like this, it's just a step in the wrong direction on what could come on a further graduated income tax if we're not being vigilant. So we will keep you updated on what comes next in this piece.
All right, well, thanks, Kelly, for the overview there. There was one other proposal that this one has to do with voting, and it could kind of change elections in the future. So can you give us a quick synopsis?
Yes, this is just for informational purposes. Ranked choice voting is something that is being pursued here in Michigan. And so it's a different way of calculating who moves on in various elections. And so you would go to the ballot box and you would rank the people in order of who you like best. And then essentially based on percentages and where people fall, there would be like rounds of voting until the certain person would reach a threshold. And this would be for statewide offices. And then also the opportunity for local jurisdictions to adopt this policy if they wanted to do the same thing. So that did move through after a lot of debate at that board meeting. I think, that meeting was 9 to 5. It took them from 9 to 1 just to work on the language for this specific piece because it is very complicated and confusing. The main argument that was given, and again, we're not taking a stance on this specific proposal, is how long will it take our elections to be certified if you go about this route, and how expensive is it to implement? It's not the Board of Canvassers' job essentially to assess that, but it could be very different and very expensive in order to go down this route. So voters will have to decide if they sign petitions to take that into consideration in the coming months. So if you have any questions about the Board of Canvassers meeting, please feel free to reach out to Jacob and I. We will certainly be on this in the coming weeks and months, and hopefully we can defeat the two that we talked about today, because we really know that it's not the right track for our small business community.
All right, well, thanks again for the overview. It sounds like it was quite a Friday. Okay, it's time for a regular segment on this show, which is Election Watch 2026. What's the story?
I'm not talking about governor this week. I'm going to talk about the U.S. Senate. So we had teased out, I think, even a month ago that while the Detroit Regional Chamber Conference was happening on Mackinac Island, there was some rumblings that U.S. Representative Bill Huizenga was considering running for U.S. Senate on the Republican side of the ticket, and those rumblings continue to be pretty prominent. He made mention last week that he's continuing to talk to the president about what might be possible. The thing that gets complicated on the Republican side of the ticket is that Mike Rogers, who ran against now sitting U.S. Senator Alyssa Slotkin last time, and he only lost by under 19,000 votes, he's running again. And so he kind of never stopped his operation from the last time around. He's been stockpiling money and endorsements. But the main thing that came across in Bill Huizenga's comments last week is that he's undeterred even by all of that. So the complication in this is that people really want Bill Huizenga to stay in the U.S. House of Representatives. He's been a longstanding member there. He has portions of the lakeshore that feeds down into the Battle Creek region in Kalamazoo. It's a little bit of a tricky area because it has tended to trend more blue over time. And he has such a stellar reputation that specifically House Republicans on the congressional level feel comfortable with him being able to resonate with voters in that district. And so there was some pushback on if he leaves that seat, does it open it up for Democrats to take it? And the Cook Political Report actually said that's one to watch if Bill Huizenga were to step aside. Bill Huizenga makes or I should say Congressman Huizenga makes the draw that if that seat's in jeopardy, because it's probably like the fifth or sixth most potential to flip, that means the current seats held by John James and Tom Barrett would go, because those are more contentious, if you will. So Just, some basic speculation going around. Will he do it? Will he not? He seems like he might, which would then obviously open up that congressional seat. And we've talked about this over time. We're going to have a lot of open congressional seats in 2026. John James is running for governor. Haley Stevens is running for U.S. Senate. Um, there's just a lot of movement. And so it's going to be really interesting to watch this all play out. The other piece of election 2026 that was kind of interesting over the weekend, the Republicans don't necessarily have a candidate for Secretary of State yet. On the Democratic side, we know that Jocelyn Benson, current Secretary of State, is running for governor. She's termed out, and there is one of her deputies running, and then Barb Byram also announced that she's running on that side of the ticket. Anthony Forlini, who is a former state representative out of Macomb County, current clerk down there, has announced that he's thinking about running on the Republican side of the ticket. And so that would be the first announced candidate on that side. But again, I want to remind people it's still early. Technically, it's still early, but we don't see a lack of candidates getting into the race. And so that is your election 2026 update for today. U.S. Senate and Secretary of State.
All right, I'm sure we'll be back here next week talking about another person who's entered the race. Okay, so tomorrow is July 1st, and that's kind of this looming budget deadline, the statutory deadline for the budget. Have they made any progress?
Yeah, Sarah, it's a fair question. And the statutory deadline, unfortunately, doesn't have any teeth. And so I would say, based on some news reports that we saw last week and what we know from being here in Lansing, there hasn't been a lot of progress made between the governor, the Senate Majority Leader, and the Speaker. There is definitely a recognition that they all want to get the school aid fund portion of the budget done because schools really do need to plan for the next year. And so I would say that there is definitely a recognition that that is the most important piece of the budget, but they're just not showing any signs of agreement. And so that makes it rough. There's also talks alongside that of really wanting to get a roads deal done, which we've been talking about, which seems like since Governor Whitmer took office, right? But you really can't couple these things together. When you take a want of a $3 billion roads deal alongside an education budget, those are two huge initiatives to try and get accomplished. And so, do I think that there will be a full budget done tomorrow? Absolutely not. That is not happening. That's really been the standard set for the last, decade plus. But they're just not all in the right place to be able to do that. Now, what does that mean? People ask, this statutory deadline of July 1st. Our budget is technically a October 1 to September 30 budget. And so we are going to have a government shutdown. That happens later in the year, which let's hope we never get to that. And we haven't had one of those for a very long time. But really, what needs to happen is that they need to all come together and decide what they're going to do. And so I think the probability of maybe getting an education budget over the threshold, it would be a very long day tomorrow. But I do think that the commitment is still there to wanting to get to that point from the three leaders. So not much of an update necessarily, other than there's no movement, but they're still talking to each other. So that's good.
Well, you do have to talk to each other, right? To make things happen. Okay, so let's talk about a bill we're watching in the Senate, and this one surrounds data privacy. Tell us a little bit more.
Sure. So this bill came up actually last year towards the end of the year. It's Senator Bayer's bill, and it's called Senate Bill 359. It essentially creates a Personal Data Privacy Act. And just so we know who it all applies, all businesses, it applies to all of them, and it's entities who do business in Michigan in either one, control or possess personal data of greater than 100,000 consumers annually, or two, control and process personal data of greater than 25,000 consumers annually and derive revenue from the data sales, excuse me. Of course, this doesn't apply to government entities. It never does. Also, businesses covered by HIPAA, and then higher education institutions and some insurance agencies. It does establish various consumers' rights related to collection and use of personal data and establishes requirements for that. It does create the right for consumers to confirm whether or not they want the controller processing the personal data and has access to that personal data, correct inaccuracies of personal data, delete personal data, obtain copies of personal data, all the personal data that you could ever imagine. And it does require data controllers to respect opt-outs. And then it has a very broad definition of what sensitive data means, which is kind of where we creep in here. So obviously, we want people's data to be protected. Nobody is saying that data should not be protected. The problem with this is that the broad definition of it is called into question, and also the implementation of this type of consumer or this Personal Data Privacy Act. It does not say how you're supposed to. So for our smallest groups, smallest employers that may handle data like this and are required to follow this Personal Data Privacy Act, we are really worried about that implementation piece. So what we've asked Senator Bayer's team is, let's take a step back, let's get some employers in a room and talk about what this means and what this looks like. Unfortunately, it's moving forward in the Senate. And so for those of you that do work in this space and you do have personal data or you work in data, we would really encourage you to stay up to date on this specific piece. And while it may advance out of the Senate this week, we're not certain if it will or not, just based on budget negotiations. We really do feel like the House is not willing to entertain something like this right now with everything that needs to get done with the budget and roads. So this is more of an FYI piece, but we are disappointed to see something like this move forward in the Senate when we need to be focusing on other things. So just put it on your radar. If you have questions, like I said, reach out to Jacob or myself and we can talk you through it.
All right, we have a few more things to try to fit in here today. Let's go next to an unemployment insurance agency announcement of some new technology.
Yes, and these can be quick hits, Sarah. So the Unemployment Insurance Agency reached out to us last week, and we know customer service has been at the forefront in what we've been hearing from our members for a long time that it's been lacking. And so we serve on the modernization work group with other fellow business organizations, and they've introduced a new chatbot feature at UIA. And we know that sometimes the human interaction is what's needed in order to process a problem. But this really will allow people to access a chatbot in order to search the entire website so people don't feel like they're lost in Wonderland to pull up certain issues that might be just a quick answer that our employers may need. Now, they have asked for feedback on that chatbot. So please make sure that if you're using it and you have something to share, that you're doing that with the agency. You can share it again with Jacob or myself, and we can share it with the UIA too. But we are encouraged to see them use AI like we are here at SBAM and you are out in the small business community in order to move customer service along. But they will obviously have staff available too to continue to help. And then also in your quarterly report that you should be receiving from the UIA, they did unveil a video of the new My UI system that's coming later this year. We would encourage you to check that out and start to get acclimated with that specific program as they move away from MyWAM. So just a couple quick UIA things, not necessarily negative at this time, but tools to help you the specific piece of your business that you interact with often.
And thanks, Kelly. I shared a link. Jacob kind of did a write-up for us that we put in our newsletter today, and I just shared it in the chat here too. All right. So another item we wanted to touch on today was in regards to the unemployment rate. What did we learn about the month of May?
It's not great, Sarah. These are not seasonally adjusted unemployment rates, but they did rise out of 14 of Michigan's 18 labor markets over the last month. And so Michigan's regional unemployment rates ranged from 4.6 to 7.4% in May. We're still one of the highest in the nation, with a median rate gain of half a percentage point, which is pretty large. It's the largest rate increase in Detroit that we've seen in the Detroit metro region in a very long time. And all 18 Michigan labor market areas displayed unemployment rate gains over the last year with a median rate increase of 1.2% overall. The Bay City, Flint, and Saginaw metro areas all exhibited the most pronounced rate increase at 1.6%. And so lastly, on this point, 48 Michigan counties exhibited unemployment rate advances over the month with a median increase of half a percentage point, and jobless rates rose in all 83 counties in Michigan. So, not great news. We'll see what the seasonably adjusted rates come through, but these have been pretty high over the last few months. And with increased weeks and benefits passed earlier this year, it's pretty disconcerting for the trust fund and where we may be heading. And so hopefully our policymakers are taking note of what's going on out there when we have so many open jobs on why people are not able to find work. So we'll keep you updated. Sorry to end kind of on that note, but it is noteworthy and we need to be tracking these things.
Absolutely. I will just mention a couple of upcoming events. I'm just checking my calendar over here. We have a Revenue First marketing webinar on July 15th that you might want to check out. And then we'll be in the Great Lakes Bay region for an owner to owner event on July 17th. So if you're in that area, we'd love to meet you there. Hope you have a wonderful week and a great 4th of July. We'll be back here next Monday at 3 o'clock.
Everybody have a great week.